It was around midnight that I heard the noise first, indistinct, rather like a light knock issuing from the ceiling. I paid little heed to it, merely putting it down to an old apartment building's settling creaks and groans, to which I had grown accustomed in the near year that I had been living there. That night was different. I sat on my couch, binge-watching a series, headphones in, with the world tuned out. Then, again, came this hollow, calculated knock. This time, it was louder, and it wasn't from above. It was coming from my door. I paused the show, holding my breath. The screen of my phone blinked at 12:03 a.m. Nobody should knock this time of night. I stayed still a second, listening. My heart was pounding. After a few minutes of silence, I convinced myself it must have been one of the neighbors off to work late or just some other random noise that I heard incorrectly. But the instant I went back to my show, there it was again, this time 3 knocks, slow and spaced out, almost too intentional. I went over to the door, planted my ear against the peephole, and saw nothing. The hallway was dimly lit, all the lights flickering on and off. My stomach turned a nervous somersault. Who knocks and then just leaves? I tried shaking off the creeping anxiety, telling myself I was overreacting. But the subsequent nights, it didn't stop. Same happening every time. Knock, followed by nothing. And every time I opened up, nobody was there. I began becoming paranoid. My apartment was on the 5th floor, and the only way up was either the elevator or via the staircase at the far end of the hall. I'd hear them if they left. I decided to wait it out one night. I sat on the couch in the dark and watched the door. It happened again just after midnight, 3 knocks. My heart raced. I had jumped up, turned the handle, and pulled the door open without looking through the peephole. But this time, the hallway wasn't empty. Someone was standing at the end, just barely visible in the shadows near the staircase. I couldn't make out their face, but they were tall, wearing a hooded jacket. They didn't move, didn't say a word. Just stood there, staring. I froze, feeling my skin crawl. Then, wordlessly, they turned and went down the stairs. I slammed the door shut, locking every bolt. My hands were shaking and my mind raced. Who was that? Why did they knock on my door every night? What did they want? I called building management the next day. They looked at the security cameras. There was nothing out of the ordinary. No person went near my door around the times that I said. They said that I must have just imagined it, or heard it from another floor. But I know what I saw. They stopped knocking that night, but I am still uneasy in my house. Every creak, every soft sound in the middle of the night makes my heart start racing. I never saw that person again, but I keep wondering. Was he really gone? Or is he just waiting for the right moment to show up again? Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more terrifying horror stories. It was October 1st, that perfect fall day when the air has that fresh autumn breeze, and the leaves start to turn golden brown. Fall is my favorite season, and this year was special. It was the first one my boyfriend Carter and I would be spending together in our new home. I wanted to surprise him by decorating the place with fall and Halloween-themed decorations before he got home from work. It was supposed to be a cute, fun way to make our house feel more festive. I went out to a few stores, picked up some items, but I was still looking for that finishing touch to tie everything together. That's when I decided to check out Facebook Marketplace. After scrolling for a bit, a listing caught my eye. It was a picture of a large plastic container filled with fall decorations, tableware, outdoor pieces, the works. The best part? It was only $20. A steal, really. The seller's profile name was Rob, and the ad mentioned he was clearing out his house, selling off everything. Seemed innocent enough. I messaged him, and to my surprise, he responded almost immediately. He told me the container had everything I needed to get my place looking perfectly festive. The only catch was that he wouldn't be available until after work, around 9 p.m. I hesitated for a moment, but I figured it was worth it for the deal. He gave me his address, and I agreed to meet him later that evening. Before I left, I told my friend Sally about it, and she insisted on coming along. "Just in case," she said, half joking. I didn't argue. It felt safer having someone with me, especially heading to a stranger's house at night. We set off around 8:30 p.m., the sun long gone, leaving us driving in the darkness. The address was about 30 minutes away, and the closer we got, the worse the neighborhood seemed. Sally kept pointing out how rundown everything looked, but I reassured her it was just an older part of town. Besides, it was dark. Everything looks creepier at night, right? As we pulled up to the address, my phone buzzed with a message from Rob. "You can come right in when you get here," it read. I showed it to Sally, and we both gave each other a look. It felt off. Normally, people would greet you at the door, not invite you into their house without even seeing you. The house looked like any other in the neighborhood, old but well kept. No cars in the driveway, though, which was odd since Rob said he'd be home by now. I messaged him back, asking if he could come to the door. There was no response, but moments later, we saw the blinds on one of the windows shift slightly, like someone was watching us. A few seconds passed, and the front door creaked open. A man's shadow stood there, but only half of him was visible, peering out from behind the door. He didn't say anything, just waved us in with a slow, deliberate motion. Everything in me was screaming to leave, but I didn't want to look paranoid in front of Sally. I called out, "Rob," but he didn't respond. He just stepped back into the house, disappearing from view, leaving the door open. Sally grabbed my arm and whispered, "Let's go." I was about to agree when a deep, gravelly voice called out from inside, "In here." Something about the tone sent a chill down my spine. Sally tugged on my sleeve, trying to get me to turn back, but curiosity got the better of me. I stepped inside, keeping Sally close behind me. The smell hit us instantly, an overwhelming stench of something rotting, mixed with an old, musty odor. It was nauseating. I heard footsteps retreating quickly into another room, and then his voice again, deeper this time, "Come in here, it's over in the living room." We cautiously followed the voice into a dimly lit room that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The carpet was stained, the furniture old and covered in dust. In the center of the room was a red plastic container with a green lid. Rob, or whoever this man was, stood next to it, his eyes hidden under the brim of a baseball cap. He looked nothing like the friendly seller I had imagined. His posture was stiff, his face expressionless. "Go ahead, open it," he said in that same unsettling voice. I froze. The container didn't even match the one from the picture in the ad. It was a different color, and something about it felt wrong. Sally whispered, "Let's go," her voice shaking. I agreed, and we started inching backward toward the door. Before we could make it out of the room, the man stepped forward and said, "What, not gonna look?" His voice was laced with something menacing now, a slight grin forming on his lips. He reached for the lid of the container, and as he started to lift it, the smell intensified, overwhelming us. That was it. Without waiting to see what was inside, we turned and bolted for the front door. We didn't look back until we were safely in the car. As I started the engine, I noticed the front door had already slammed shut behind us. No sign of the man. We drove in silence for a few minutes, both of us too shaken to speak. Finally, Sally broke the silence. "What the hell just happened?" I had no answer. I didn't know what was in that container, and I didn't want to find out. The next day, I told Carter everything. He was furious that I'd even gone to the house in the first place. After calming down, he insisted on looking up the address, and that's when things got even stranger. According to public records, The house belonged to an elderly woman who lived there alone. There was no record of anyone named Rob. I blocked the profile on Facebook and reported it, but I never heard anything about it again. From that day on, I swore off meeting strangers from the internet. Some deals just aren't worth the risk. It was a Tuesday night when it happened. The kind of night where the streets were deserted, and you could almost feel the weight of the world pressing down in the silence. I had just finished my shift at the local diner, a regular stop for late-night truckers and people coming back from work, nothing unusual. I remember checking my phone as I walked toward my car. 1:45 a.m. The air was still, almost suffocating, and there wasn't a soul in sight, except for one figure standing under the dim streetlight across the lot. At first glance, I almost didn't register who it was, but as I squinted through the haze, I recognized him. Jeff Hiller. He was an oddball, but harmless. He'd been in a few of those comedy sketches I'd seen online. Funny guy, weird humor. I'd actually served him once at the diner, and we'd exchanged a few words. He'd come in late, just like me, and always sat in the back, alone, quietly sipping his coffee. Tonight, though, he wasn't smiling or joking. He was just standing there, staring at me. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. It's just Jeff, I told myself, probably waiting for someone or lost in his own world. I gave him a half-hearted wave and hurried toward my car, suddenly feeling the need to get home quicker than usual. But the moment I turned my back on him, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They weren't fast enough to be chasing, but just close enough to keep me on edge. I glanced over my shoulder. Jeff wasn't where he had been. He was moving toward me, his eyes locked on mine, expressionless. I fumbled for my keys, cursing under my breath. There was no reason for me to be this nervous. I knew him. He was a public figure, for God's sake. Yet, something about the way he was moving, so deliberate, like he had all the time in the world, made my pulse race. When I finally unlocked my car and jumped inside, I felt a rush of relief. I quickly locked the doors and looked back to see if he was still following. Jeff was standing just a few feet away, but this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, barely visible in the dim light, there was another man. Taller, bulkier, but his face was obscured by shadows. It was like he had been there all along, watching, waiting, blending into the night. My hands were trembling as I started the engine. I backed out of the parking spot, my heart thudding so loudly I could barely think straight. Both Jeff and the stranger stood there, just watching me leave. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing, that my mind had just played tricks on me. But when I got to work, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few of my coworkers were talking about someone getting mugged in the area last night, but the details didn't make sense. No one had seen Jeff Hiller. No one even mentioned him. To this day, I can't explain what I saw. Whether Jeff was involved, or if he was just another victim, I'll never know. But every time I see him on TV now, that night comes rushing back to me, the way he stood there, the stranger lurking behind him. And I wonder, was it really him at all? Or was I just in the wrong place, at the wrong time? I was alone in a cold, dimly lit hospital room. The thin hospital gown barely shielded me from the draft, and the quiet beeping of machines was the only sound cutting through the silence. It had been hours since the nurse last checked on me. Around midnight, I pressed the call button to get a nurse to check on me, but no one came. I pressed it again, and still nothing. It felt like I was cut off from the rest of the world, trapped in a hospital room with nothing but my anxiety and that growing sense of dread. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, the feeling that someone was watching me. Hospitals make you paranoid, right? But as I lay there, I swear I heard faint footsteps outside my door. They were slow, deliberate, as if someone was pacing back and forth, stopping every few steps. My eyes flicked to the door, half expecting someone to burst in, but nothing happened. Just the rhythmic echo of those footsteps, and then silence. I was admitted for a minor procedure, something routine, but the night stretched out into what felt like an endless nightmare. I didn't want to be there longer than necessary, especially since I had a weird feeling from the moment I arrived. The hospital was older, and some parts of it were clearly outdated. The staff were professional, but there was something off, almost like they were avoiding certain questions. Then the door handle to my room moved. Not violently, not like in a horror movie, but slowly, like someone was testing it, trying to turn it without making noise. I froze, heart racing, eyes locked on the door. It stopped after a moment, but I could hear breathing from the other side. Heavy, labored breathing, like someone who was sick or in pain. My own breath caught in my throat as I tried to make sense of it. Was it a patient? A staff member? But why would they try to open the door like that, in the middle of the night? And why didn't they just come in? I finally worked up the courage to call out. Hello? Is someone there? No answer. The breathing stopped. I got out of bed, my legs weak from the lack of movement, and crept toward the door. And the clock on the wall seemed to move slower with every passing second. My phone had died, and I had no way to distract myself from the eerie stillness of the night. Earlier, I had noticed an old, unused wing of the hospital on my way to my room. The doors leading to it were locked, with a faded sign that said, "Do not enter." I remember asking the nurse about it, but she just smiled tightly and changed the subject. Maybe that's why, when I heard the footsteps again, closer this time, I couldn't shake the unsettling thought that they were coming from that direction. I pressed my ear against it, but all I could hear now was the distant hum of machinery from the hallway. Slowly, I opened the door, half expecting someone to be standing there. But the hallway was empty. The lights flickered slightly, casting strange shadows along the walls. My room was at the end of the corridor, so there wasn't much space for anyone to hide. Just that door to the abandoned wing a few steps away. My heart pounded as I walked closer to it. The same "Do not enter" sign stared back at me, but this time, the lock on the door looked different. It wasn't quite locked anymore. It was like someone had forced it open recently. Against my better judgment, I reached out to touch the handle. It was cold, almost freezing. The door creaked as it opened, and the smell hit me immediately, a thick, metallic scent that made my stomach turn. I could barely see anything inside, but I felt a presence, something wrong about this place. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my shoulder, hard. I whipped around, heart in my throat, only to see a nurse standing there. Her face was pale, and her eyes wide. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice trembling. She didn't look like the nurses who had been attending to me before. Before I could say anything, she yanked the door shut and guided me back to my room. "It's not safe," she kept saying, over and over, but wouldn't explain why. As I made my way out, I passed that locked door again. This time, the sign was gone. The door was sealed shut, as if it had never been tampered with. The rest of the night was a blur. A different nurse came to check on me later, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. When I asked about the woman who had stopped me, they looked confused. There was no one on staff matching her description. I was discharged the next morning, still shaken but eager to leave. I never found out who, or what, was in that old wing of the hospital, but I haven't set foot in a hospital since. The experience still haunts me to this day. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I think about that hand on my shoulder and the terror in that nurse's eyes. Whatever was on the other side of that door. I'm just glad I didn't find out. The October air was crisp, carrying the sweet scent of fallen leaves and the faint echo of laughter from children in costumes. I remember it clearly. The night was Halloween, and I had just turned 16. For me, it was about hanging out with friends, wearing ridiculous costumes, and, of course, scoring the most candy. Little did I know, that night would turn into a nightmare I'd never escape. My friends and I decided to take the long way through the woods back to my house. It was a shortcut we often took, but on that particular night, it felt different, darker, almost alive. The trees loomed over us, their twisted branches resembling skeletal hands reaching for the sky. With every step, the laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that made my skin crawl. As we walked, I noticed a flicker of light in the distance. At first, I thought it was just the moon peeking through the trees, but as we drew closer, I saw it was a campfire surrounded by a few older teenagers. They looked like they were having a great time, and I felt a sudden urge to join them. My friends were hesitant, but I convinced them it would be fun. We approached cautiously, the warm glow illuminating the faces of the group. They welcomed us, and for a moment, everything felt normal. We laughed, exchanged candy, and shared our Halloween stories. But then I noticed something off. One of the guys was staring at me, his eyes uncomfortably intense. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe he was just fascinated by my costume. Then, the mood shifted. One of the girls in the group suggested telling scary stories, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I was eager to impress, so I shared a tale about a local legend, a man who had gone missing in these very woods years ago. As I spoke, I noticed the guy who had been staring at me leaning closer, his expression changing from curiosity to something more predatory. When my story ended, the group seemed to hang on my words, their eyes wide. But instead of the expected laughter or gasps, a heavy silence enveloped us. Then the guy finally spoke. "That's a nice story," he said, his voice smooth yet dripping with malice, "but it's not nearly as scary as what happened last Halloween." The air turned thick, and I leaned in, intrigued despite the growing unease. He recounted a horrifying tale about a family who had ventured into the woods on Halloween night, only to never return. They say, he leaned in closer, that if you listen closely, you can hear their screams echoing in the wind. A shiver ran down my spine. Before I could respond, a rustling sound broke the tension. My heart raced as I turned to see a shadow dart between the trees, too quick to make out any details. My instincts screamed to run, but I stayed rooted to the spot, a sense of dread washing over me. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. My friends nodded, eyes wide with fear. The guy by the fire just chuckled, the sound sinister against the backdrop of the crackling flames. Suddenly, the girl who had suggested the story stood up, a terrified look plastered across her face. "I think we should go," she said, her voice shaky. The laughter had vanished, replaced by an oppressive weight in the air. As we began to back away, the guy suddenly stood up, his eyes dark and serious. "You don't want to leave yet. The night is just beginning." That's when I felt it, a presence creeping up behind me. A chill slid down my spine, and I could barely breathe. I turned just in time to see a figure emerging from the shadows, its eyes glowing eerily in the firelight. It was too tall, too distorted, and something inside me screamed to run. My friends were now fidgeting, glancing at each other nervously. But I couldn't back down. I needed to know where this story was headed. "What happened to them?" I asked, almost breathless. "Some say they got lost," he continued, a twisted smile creeping across his face. "But I heard it was something much worse, something that hunts in these woods." Without a second thought, we bolted, sprinting through the woods, the sound of our pounding feet drowned out by the eerie silence. The laughter of the campfire crowd faded behind us, replaced by the heavy thump of my heart in my ears. We ran until we reached the safety of my house, panting and terrified. But as we sat in my living room, trying to shake off the night's events, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The laughter of my friends faded into the background, and I could hear a distant echo, like the whispers of something lurking just beyond the trees. Every Halloween since, I find myself looking over my shoulder, haunted by that night and the chilling reminder that not all stories end happily. Some things are better left undiscovered, and some Halloween nights will always be marked by an unsettling shadow that lingers in the darkness.